Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself wrestling with those persistent inner voices, the ones that tell you you've messed up or, you're not good enough? Or maybe you've pondered the very nature of your own mind. What is it exactly? Where is it? And is it truly you? Today, we're embarking on, well, a unique deep dive into some truly profound questions. We'll be guided by ancient wisdom from Buddhist, Confucian, Daoist, and even Kabbalistic traditions. Our mission really is to carefully interpret these dialogues, these rich sources. We want to extract insights that promise to shed light on some of life's deepest questions, and perhaps maybe even transform how you view your own inner world.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how these ancient texts, spanning such diverse cultures, often converge on a very similar core inquiry.
Right.
It's about the fundamental nature of consciousness and ultimately the path to liberation. It really raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? Can understanding these timeless concepts actually make a tangible difference in our daily experience?
That's the hope, isn't it?
I believe so. I believe that by exploring these dialogues, really digging into them, we can indeed uncover powerful tools for self-understanding and inner freedom.
Okay, so our journey begins with a question that seems simple on the surface, yet, well, it has puzzled sages for millennia. What is the mind? Our listener highlighted a really powerful phrase from the King Jing, that's the scripture of clarity and stillness, which says, "Osia," which translates roughly to, when you observe your mind, the mind has no mind. And they also wondered how this connects to other profound stories from across different traditions.
Indeed, and that inquiry strikes right at the very heart of Chinese philosophy, particularly Buddhism and the Shinzu, or the heart-mind school. It fundamentally challenges our intuitive grasp of what mind even is. It pushes us beyond the common idea of it being just, a physical organ or a simple collection of thoughts.
Like the brain equals mind idea.
Exactly. We often instinctively think of the mind as this solid, central control unit, kind of like an inner CEO, right? But these ancient traditions propose something far more fluid, more dynamic, and in a really profound sense, empty of a fixed definition.
So let's start right there then.
Yeah.
What does that truly invite us to understand? When we really delve into interpreting that phrase, what picture of the mind emerges?
Well, the idea is when you turn your attention inward, when you actively look to pinpoint mind as some kind of concrete, graspable object, you just won't find it. It's not a physical thing you can put your finger on. Think about it. Your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, they're all in constant motion, aren't they? They arise with certain conditions, and then they cease when those conditions shift.
Always changing.
Always changing. So the mind in this context isn't some static, permanent fixture. It's more like a dynamic process, a stream of awareness that is ever shifting. So Funanals means seeing through the illusion that mind is something solid to cling to, something with a fixed, independent nature. It's a temporary function, really. A manifestation that arises from specific conditions, always right here in the present moment. Now, this isn't about saying the mind doesn't exist at all. That's not the point. It's more that it lacks a permanent, unchanging self. It's an invitation to really scrutinize our basic assumptions about what our mind is.
And this idea, it echoes beautifully in another powerful ancient text, doesn't it? Our listener brought up the dialogue between Buddha and his disciple Ananda in the Shurangama Sutra. Ananda tries again and again to physically locate the mind. Is it in the head? The chest? Somewhere in the senses? But Buddha systematically denies all of Ananda's suggestions. What was Buddha really trying to show by negating all these physical locations? What's the core insight there?
Well, Ananda's struggle is incredibly relatable, I think, because it mirrors how most of us perceive our minds. We tend to assume it must be somewhere physical, the brain processing thoughts, maybe the heart housing emotions, or even within our sensory organs.
Right, it feels like it's in the head.
It does. But Buddha, with each negation, wasn't denying the mind's existence. What he was doing was steering Ananda away from the idea that the true mind is a physical entity located in a particular place. Instead, he was guiding Ananda to distinguish between two concepts. First, what we call the Wonsin, that's the deluded or false mind, and second, the Zonsin, the true or original mind.
Okay, deluded mind versus true mind. What's the difference?
The deluded mind, the Wonsin, is that fleeting stream of thoughts, emotions, and consciousness that we typically identify as my mind. It's the everyday chatter, the ups and downs. But the true mind, the Zonsin, is something else. It's constant, unmoving awareness itself. It's what we might call the inherent capacity to simply be aware, to know, to illuminate. Crucially, it's not born, and it doesn't die. It's timeless.
So if I understand correctly then, Our everyday mind, the one we usually experience, is often just this parade of fleeting thoughts like clouds passing, while the true mind is more like the sky itself, the unmoving awareness behind it all.
That's a great analogy.
It's like mistaking the reflection in a mirror for the actual mirror.
Exactly. The reflection is the Wangsin, the transient thoughts and emotions. The mirror itself, that clear, unblemished surface that reflects everything without being affected by it, that is the Zangsin. It's the true, ever-present awareness. So the core insight here when we interpret this dialogue is that our ordinary experience of mind is often just a cascade of diluted, conditioned thoughts. The true mind is an unmoving, ever-present awareness, utterly distinct from those fleeting contents.
That's a fascinating distinction. And moving from a different Eastern tradition, our listener also highlighted Wang Yangming. He's a pivotal figure in Chinese philosophy, right? And his famous investigation of bamboo. What profound realization did he come to after 7 days of intensely observing bamboo? And how does his experience resonate with this idea of the mind having no fixed mind?
Wang Yangming's encounter with the bamboo is such a powerful illustration of this internal shift we're talking about. Initially, he was a follower of Zhuxi, another major philosopher, who believed that universal principles, or Lin, could be understood by investigating external objects, sort of like finding truth out there.
Okay, so study the world to understand the principles.
Exactly. So Wang Yangming took this very literally. He spent 7 intense days and nights just staring at bamboo, expecting to unlock profound truths about its Lin. But far from gaining any great insight, he just became exhausted and actually fell ill. And this experience, this failure in a sense, became his profound turning point.
What did he realize?
His realization was, well, revolutionary for his time. He realized that the true source of suffering, and also the roots of wisdom, are not found in external things like bamboo. They're not out there. Instead, they reside within one's own internal thoughts, the Nian Tu. This deep introspection led him to his core philosophy of Xinjignan, which means mind is principle.
Mind is principle, so the truth is within.
Precisely. He asserted that ultimate truth, the lie, is not something outside us that we need to seek externally. It's inherent in the mind's very essence. And this deeply echoes the Buddhist idea we mentioned, the Jingwei-wu, meaning no thing exists outside the mind. It emphasizes that true understanding blossoms from within, through deep introspection, rather than through endless external seeking or intellectual investigation alone. The core insight is that our reality, our experience, is primarily an internal construction.
Okay, so we're exploring mind without its mind. And it's not about absence, but about the nature of existence. Or maybe, more accurately, the absence of a fixed, independent nature. Let's try to unpack this from a few different angles, looking at how diverse wisdom traditions illuminate this kind of liberating concept.
That's a great way to put it. And when we connect these different threads, we really see how different traditions aim to loosen our fundamental attachment to the mind as some solid, permanent entity. Each offers a unique lens for this profound understanding. So from a Buddhist perspective, the mind is not a fixed entity. It utterly lacks inherent self-nature, or wu-zu, as it's called. When you try to find it, you can't pinpoint it, precisely because it only manifests through its function, through the arising and ceasing of thoughts and perceptions. Understanding this helps us break free from that deep-seated attachment to the idea of a solid, independent self or a mind subject that's running the show. The real insight here is that this realization offers a profound liberation from self-clinging. It frees you up.
Okay, that's the Buddhist view. What about the Confucian heart-mind school, like Wang Yangming?
Right. From the Confucian heart-mind perspective, particularly Wang Yangming's school, the mind isn't just an organ or a stream of thoughts. It's seen more as our innate capacity to be aware, to discern right from wrong, and to spontaneously generate good or evil intentions. His key concept of jili, zilingzi, or extending innate knowing, means returning to this original pure essence of the mind, realizing that ultimate moral principles reside within, rather than constantly chasing external ideas or rules out there. The deep wisdom here is that our internal moral compass, our innate knowing, is our most reliable guide.
And the Chan or Zen perspective, they often use metaphors, right?
They do. From a Chan or Zen perspective, the mind is often compared to a mirror. Our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions are seen as simply reflections or shadows dancing on that mirror's surface. They appear, they linger, they fade. The fundamental error, the delusion, is when we mistake these fleeting reflections for the mirror itself. We identify with the thoughts, the emotions, but by letting go of attachment to these transient thoughts, the mirror itself, our original awakened nature, often expressed as Jigsinfo, mind as Buddha, is revealed. The insight is that true clarity, true peace, emerges when the mind surface is calm and free of clinging to its contents.
To make this really resonate, really stick, our listener provided a beautiful analogy about the ocean and its waves. How does that fit in?
Oh, it's a perfect way to visualize this whole idea. Imagine the vast, boundless ocean. The ocean itself represents your true mind, that Dzongchen we talked about. It's expansive, constant, deep, and fundamentally unaffected by what happens on its surface.
Okay, the deep, calm ocean.
Exactly. Now, consider the waves on the ocean. These waves are like your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, the Wanzhen. They're constantly arising, cresting, and then dissolving back into the ocean. Now, if you mistakenly believe that these individual waves are the entire ocean, you'll naturally conclude the ocean disappears when the waves subside, or that the ocean itself is turbulent when the waves are high.
Right, you identify with the temporary state.
Precisely. But the true ocean, the deep awareness, remains vast and deep, completely untouched by the coming and going of any particular wave. The profound insight here is the importance of not mistaking your transient thoughts and emotions, the waves, for your deeper, unchanging essence, the ocean. You are the ocean, not just the fleeting waves on the surface.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. And our listener took this concept even further, didn't they? Making a brilliant connection between mind without its mind and how we navigate daily life, including dealing with those persistent negative voices we often hear internally. And then they introduced another profound phrase from the Qingjing Jing, which means something like, when you observe objects from afar, the objects have no objects. This really expands our understanding beyond just our inner world to everything around us, doesn't it?
Yes, you've highlighted a critical expansion of this core principle. This shows us that the idea of emptiness, or this lack of inherent self-nature, isn't confined just to our internal experience of mind. It applies universally. It applies to all phenomena, both within and outside ourselves. This interconnectedness, when you really grasp it, reveals a profound unity in perception and existence. It breaks down that rigid subject-object barrier we usually operate with.
So these two phrases, the mind has no mind and objects have no objects, they're like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. They offer a really comprehensive understanding. It teaches us that internally, our mind, when truly examined, lacks a fixed inherent self-nature. It's not a solid, unchanging entity. Correspondingly, asuso means that externally, all objects, everything we perceive out there, also lack a fixed independent self-nature. They too are temporary manifestations of conditions, composites of various factors, constantly in flux. So the core insight from interpreting this pair is that both inner and outer realities are empty, newajikum. Now remember, empty here doesn't mean non-existent. It means empty of a permanent, absolute, unchanging reality. This perspective invites non-attachment to all phenomena, internal and external.
Okay, so if I look at, say, this microphone right here in front of me, it's not truly a microphone in some absolute fixed sense. What does that really mean for how we perceive our world day to day, and how might that understanding actually change our interactions?
Precisely. We automatically label things, don't we? A table, a person, a failed event. It's how our minds organize reality. But these wisdom traditions encourage us to look deeper, to question those labels. A table isn't some independent, self-existent entity called table. It's a collection of wood, maybe metal, screws, the labor of a craftsperson, the passage of time, specific environmental conditions. It has no independent tableness.
It's dependent on all those things.
Completely dependent. Similarly, the feeling of an event being a failure isn't inherent in the event itself. The event simply is. The label of failure is a definition you impose upon it, based on your expectations, your interpretations, maybe a narrative from your past. All things, internal and external, are in constant flux. There are no fixed, unchanging objects with inherent independent natures. So Kinney helps us break our attachment to external objects and internal ones too, as solid, absolute realities. It urges us to see their conditioned, fluid nature. The insight is that our labels, our interpretations, significantly create our experienced reality, not the other way around.
This is incredibly powerful, especially when we bring it back to our listeners' experience with those negative voices or inner critics. How does Echiyo, this understanding of the nature of external things, help us with those very real internal objects, those persistent, self-blaming thoughts that feel so solid?
That's a crucial application. Those negative thoughts or critical voices are, in a very real sense, like internal objects. They often feel incredibly solid, don't they? Like undeniable curses that define who you are. You might hear them say, you messed up again, or you're just not good enough, and these voices can feel like absolute truths about your being. But if you apply the wisdom of Daoist to them, you begin to realize that they too lack inherent self-nature. They are not permanently you. They are temporary results of conditions, maybe past memories surfacing, childhood traumas being triggered, cultural programming playing out, or just subconscious patterns replaying. These voices are not your true self, your Zengsen. They are like transient forms, just as a table is not a permanent table, but a temporary assembly of parts. By recognizing these internal objects as lacking inherent self-nature, as being empty in that sense, we can begin to detach from their power and stop letting them define us. The insight is that even your harshest inner critic is just a conditioned thought, not an ultimate truth about you.
Wow. Okay, and our listener went even deeper, describing a beautiful layered progression in the King Jing. It sounds almost like peeling an onion, moving systematically from inner to outer observation. They talked about Worshu, observing the mind within, the mind has no mind. Then Wushu, observing the form within, the form has no form. Then Shu, observing the form without, the form has no form. And finally, Shushu, observing nothingness from afar, nothingness has no nothingness. This sounds like a complete spherical path outlined right there.
It really is. This is a truly profound and incredibly insightful interpretation, outlining a progressive path of deep observation and release. It takes you from the innermost self all the way to the very concept of emptiness itself. Let's break down this powerful progression, exploring each layer for its deeper meaning, because interpreting this sequence is key. First, I like this ow. As we've discussed quite a bit now, this means observing that your mind is not reducible to your thoughts, emotions, or memories. Those are like passing clouds. Your true essence is the vast, unchanging sky of awareness that contains them. The practice here is not to identify with those transient experiences, whether they are past mistakes or current negative voices. They are not fundamentally you.
Okay, step one, recognize thoughts aren't me.
Exactly. Then, two, you go deeper, observing your physical body, your form within. You come to realize it's a temporary construct, a temporary vehicle made of conditions, blood, bone, breath, not your eternal self. There's an analogy sometimes used. Your soul or consciousness is like a bird, and your body is like a tree. The bird temporarily rests on the tree, but the tree is not its ultimate home. The bird will eventually move on. Your body is a temporary dwelling for your consciousness, the insight. Your body is a precious, temporary tool, not your unchanging identity.
Makes sense. Then what?
Then three. You extend this outward, observing the physical forms of others, their identities, their roles in society. You see that these too are impermanent and lack fixed essence. Their bodies, their job titles, their social status, all temporary constructs. The wisdom here is to avoid clinging to outer appearances or societal labels, whether for yourself or for others, as ultimate truths. It frees us from judging solely by externals and helps cultivate compassion.
So mind, then body, then others' bodies and roles. What's next?
Broadening further, 4. This encompasses all external phenomena, all objects in the world, as we discussed before. The world around you, in this view, is like images projected onto a movie screen. It exists and takes on meaning primarily through your perception and interpretation. The analogy of the half-full, half-empty glass applies perfectly here. Your perspective, your internal state, largely defines your reality, not the object itself. The insight is that reality is far more subjective and malleable than we often imagine.
And the final step, observing nothingness. That sounds very abstract.
It is the ultimate stage, Vigilanza. This is incredibly profound and perhaps the trickiest. It means that even the very concept of emptiness, which we've been using as a tool, must not be clung to. If you fixate on emptiness as an absolute truth, or as something to be achieved or possessed, it becomes just another form of attachment, another mental object to grasp onto. This is the essence of the Buddhist middle way, not falling into the extreme of attachment to existence, nor falling into the extreme of attachment to emptiness or non-existence. It's about transcending all dualistic concepts. The core insight, true liberation, means letting go of even the idea of letting go of the concept of emptiness itself. Wow. So the overarching insight from interpreting this entire progression is that all phenomena, internal and external, physical and conceptual, are conditionally arisen and lack fixed self-nature. This progressive shedding of attachment, layer by layer, ultimately leads one back to the unmoving, pure essence of awareness, which is our true fundamental nature.
This final step, Vadukreso, feels incredibly profound and maybe a bit elusive. It's like saying, don't even cling to the idea of not clinging. That's quite the paradox. Our listener also specifically pointed to a deeper text from the King Jingjing that delves into this even further. That's a soche yen pomti but af bukie mahu hochieki. But after her yokom koyu of gul.
Geotki, tusirkache ife keja koya, pasita shilojam hosugokanche, gulfijakiyu, ke kashe fi kache, he espond is edja. The passage is indeed a masterclass in subtlety. It's guiding us beyond simple, dualistic thinking existence versus non-existence, stillness versus activity, and highlighting the ultimate aim of these practices. It's absolutely crucial to understand the nuances of kung, emptiness, and wu, the nothingness, no being here, and especially that warning, why even the desire for stillness can become an obstacle. This text really illuminates the highest goal, a state of true, unconditioned liberation. Interpreting it carefully is key.
Okay, let's try to break it down. What does that start us with?
It begins with yuchu. This suggests that three categories or states, often interpreted as past, present, and future thoughts, or perhaps mind, objects, and the concept of emptiness itself, when observed with wu wei, meaning non-attachment and non-fabrication, without trying to manipulate or grasp them, naturally reveal their empty nature, their lack of inherent self. When you approach them without clinging, their conditioned nature becomes evident.
Okay, so observing without grasping reveals emptiness, then it gets repetitive.
Yes. This sequence is designed to hammer home a critical point. Hang, observing emptiness. Emptiness is also empty. Emptiness has no object to empty, and a hang, that which is emptied, also has no self-nature. These phrases repeatedly emphasize that even the concept of emptiness itself and your act of observing or realizing emptiness must not be treated as a concrete thing to hold on to. If you think, I've achieved emptiness, or treat emptiness as something you possess, you've fallen right back into another form of attachment. Emptiness itself is empty of inherent nature. It's a tool for liberation, not a final destination to cling to.
So don't make emptiness into another thing, then
For nothingness is nothing. Nothingness is nothing. Further negates any absolute singular stance. Even nothingness or non-being isn't an absolute concept to be held onto. It rejects any ultimate unchanging position. The insight here is that liberation is about transcending all fixed views, all dogmatic positions.
leading to, what kind of stillness is this?
This points to the result. A deep, serene, inherent stillness. A profound tranquility that is naturally abiding. It's not a stillness achieved by suppressing thoughts or eliminating activity. It's a natural, unrooted state of peace. And also means this stillness doesn't have an object that is being stilled. It's not the result of something being made quiet. It's a pre-existing pure state. It's peace that simply is, effortlessly.
But then the warning, yes, a powerful warning.
Yep.
If you desire stillness, that very desire creates activity and becomes an obstacle. This is so crucial. If your intention is to desire stillness or quietness, if you're striving for peace, that very desire itself creates mental activity, a subtle tension, a striving. And that, ironically, becomes an obstacle to true, effortless stillness. True stillness cannot be manufactured by desire. You must even let go of the desire for stillness itself. The insight is paradoxical. Desiring peace actually creates agitation.
Wow. So let go of even wanting peace. Define peace.
In a sense, yes. Which brings us to the end. Slow Xingzhe, when all attachments to existence, to non-existence, and even to the desire for stillness are released, what emerges is true, pure, and constant stillness. This stillness is both inherently pure and untainted, Sanjin, and is able to spontaneously and appropriately respond to the world. Sanjin Yiwu. It is a responsive, engaged stillness, not a dead quiet. This ultimate state leads to the regaining of the true, inherent awareness or mind. Sancheng Dikyu. The deep insight is that authentic stillness isn't passive withdrawal. It's dynamically engaged with life, rooted in pure awareness.
That's incredibly nuanced. Can you clarify the practical difference between empty, chung, and nothingness in this context? They seem to be used so closely, yet you highlighted a subtle but crucial distinction. How should we interpret them differently?
That's a great question. And the distinction, while subtle, is vital for avoiding misunderstanding. In classical Chinese and Buddhist texts, kyung, or emptiness, fundamentally emphasizes that things lack independent, unchanging self-existence. They are dependently originated. Think of empty as like a cloud. It's real in a conventional sense. It exists, but it's constantly changing, a temporary aggregation of water vapor. It has no fixed, independent cloudness. Emptiness as a concept is primarily a tool used to break attachment by showing the conditioned, impermanent nature of all things. It's not meant to deny their conventional existence or function.
Okay, so empty means lack of inherent independent nature. How is nothingness different?
Owu, or nothingness, can carry the connotation of absolute non-existence, as if the cloud simply wasn't there at all, a complete void. While Taoism uses Wu very creatively, for example, in the idea that being and non-being give birth to each other, in a strictly Buddhist context, if Wu is interpreted as absolute negation or nihilism, believing that nothing exists at all, or that actions have no consequences, it can lead to a dangerous philosophical dead end. So the wisdom traditions, especially Buddhism, are careful to distinguish these terms, to avoid such misinterpretations. To simplify, empty, Kun, means no inherent nature, while nothingness, Wu, can imply absolute non-existence. The spiritual practice involves freeing ourselves from clinging to existence, and from clinging to nothingness or non-existence. Both extremes must be released for true liberation, which lies in the middle way.
Okay, that helps clarify. This is all incredibly profound, but let's try to bring this down to earth. Our listeners shared some very personal, relatable experiences, specifically challenges while babysitting and the ensuing cascade of self-blame. They wondered if this is connected to those negative voices they described earlier and how to actually apply these concepts of mind without its mind and objects without their objects to these real-life situations.
Yes, this is truly where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? These real-life situations are perfect opportunities to apply these ancient insights. They're the testing ground. And when we step back and explore these moments using the frameworks we've discussed, we can clearly see how the deluded mind, the Joaquin, often operates, and how understanding these concepts can indeed provide a path to greater inner freedom and peace, even amidst difficulty.
So let's look at the listener's experiences. A child eating something potentially toxic, or another falling and hitting their head, despite the listener's vigilant care. How can we interpret these events using these ideas?
Well, these events are classic examples of what Buddhism calls dependently originated conditions. Many factors contribute to such outcomes, right? The environment, the child's innate curiosity and unpredictability, a split second of inattention, perhaps even an element of simple chance, or as some might say, fate. Attributing full blame to a singular idea like, I am not good enough or I am a failure, drastically simplifies a complex web of causes and effects into a singular, self-defeating narrative. This is a deeply ingrained habit of the deluded mind, finding a single internal cause for complex external events.
So those thoughts like, you messed up again, you're just not suited for this. That's the Wangzhen, the deluded mind, essentially defining you based on these transient events. It's grabbing onto the event and making it me.
Precisely. The deluded mind springs into action. Such events don't just happen in a vacuum. They often trigger old patterns, maybe past memories of being blamed, ingrained perfectionistic tendencies, defensive beliefs learned over time, perhaps even unresolved childhood traumas, or cultural messaging that emphasized fault or inadequacy. Those "you messed up" voices are accumulated reflexes, like mental habits replaying automatically in the present moment. They are not your true mind, your Zungsen. They are just visiting thoughts, like those waves on the ocean we talked about, that we mistakenly identify with and believe define our core self. By recognizing these thoughts as conditioned responses, not fundamental truths, we can begin to gain distance from them and disempower them.
Okay, so how does applying the emptiness view help here? If I see the thought I'm a failure as empty,
If you apply the emptiness, view the understanding that things, including thoughts and feelings, lack inherent fixed self-nature, you can start to observe these self-blaming thoughts. You can acknowledge them. There's a failure thought again. You see them as just thoughts, mental events that arise and pass, lacking inherent fixed self-nature. You realize they are temporary reactions, conditioned responses, not your permanent identity or an absolute truth about you. This process of seeing their nature as empty of true, independent self significantly weakens their power to define or overwhelm you. You create space.
but just to be clear, this isn't about avoiding responsibility, right? It's not an excuse to say, oh, well, it's all empty, so it doesn't matter what I do. I don't need to learn or improve from my mistakes. That sounds like a dangerous misinterpretation of emptiness.
Absolutely not. That would be falling into nihilism, which these traditions strongly warn against. Emptiness doesn't negate cause and effect or karma or the need for ethical conduct and learning. We absolutely learn, we improve, we take action when needed. The key difference is this: you take responsibility for your actions and make concrete improvements where necessary, without internalizing the outcome as a permanent flaw in your being or allowing it to define your entire identity. For example, the balanced perspective, using this wisdom, would be something like, okay, this event happened. I need to review my safety protocols and perhaps be more vigilant in certain situations. That's the practical learning. But it doesn't mean I am a complete failure as a person or intrinsically unsuitable for all child-related work forever. It's about discerning responsibility and learning from self-condemnation and identity-level despair.
That distinction is crucial.
And this ties directly into another point the listener raised: perfectionism. Perfectionism is a very powerful desire for things to unfold exactly as we wish, for perfect control. If flawlessness is the implicit goal, then any deviation, any mistake, inevitably becomes a catastrophe, triggering immense self-blame and suffering. The principle we discussed earlier, desiring stillness creates activity, applies perfectly here in a different way. Desiring no mistakes or desiring perfect control actually creates more anxiety, more internal agitation, more fear of failure. True freedom, paradoxically, comes from letting go of the attachment to perfection and allowing mistakes as a natural, inevitable part of growth and learning in an imperfect world. The insight is that embracing life's inherent imperfection, including our own, is the path to inner peace and resilience.
Okay, this is making more sense in practical terms, and the source actually provides some incredibly practical tools for navigating these specific moments of self-blame. What are these 4 steps and the 2 short guided practices? How can we use them right when those self-blaming voices arise?
Yes, these are designed as immediate, actionable steps. They help shift you from being automatically overwhelmed by thoughts to a state of calmer awareness and constructive action. By observing the arising of these thoughts, as we've discussed, we can disengage from their power. So the 4 steps to navigating self-blame are: 1. Pings up. The very first thing when that wave of self-blame hits is to physically and mentally pause. Just stop what you're doing, even for a second. Take a conscious, deep breath. This creates a tiny but crucial space, a moment of non-reaction before the automatic thought spirals take over completely.
Just pause, interrupt the pattern.
Exactly. Tip
Yeah.
1. Observe. Then gently label the thought or emotion without judgment. Say silently to yourself, this is a thought of pain, or okay, this is fear arising, or feeling of failure. Treat it like a visitor, an external object that lacks inherent self-nature, as we discussed with this link. Just naming it, observing it, reduces its power to merge with your identity.
See it as a thing passing through.
All right, 3. Bianxi Yinyuan, identify conditions. Next, briefly list maybe 2 or 3 contributing factors for the event, beyond just my fault. For example, okay, contributing factors were the child's sudden curiosity, the specific layout of the environment, and yes, a momentary lapse in my focus. This consciously reframes the event from a singular, self-blaming, my-fault narrative to a more complex, realistic, dependently originated one, reflecting that Dio principle. It acknowledges multiple causes.
Broadens the perspective.
It does. And finally, 4. Tractor. Huido Xingdong, return to action. Take a small, concrete, constructive step based on the situation. This might be explaining what happened calmly to the parents, checking on the child's well-being again, making a note to adjust safety measures for next time, or even just taking another deep breath. Focused, practical action is far more powerful and freeing than getting stuck in endless, unproductive self-reproach.
Stop, observe, identify conditions, return to action. That sounds very manageable. And the 2 short practices.
Yes, these are designed to help internalize this shift in perspective.
A.
Returning to the sky of awareness, 1 to 2 minutes. Find a quiet spot if you can, even just for a minute. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take a few slow, deep breaths. When a self-blaming thought arises, acknowledge it gently. I hear you, or okay, blame thought is here. Then gently but firmly shift your focus back to your natural breath, feeling the sensation of breathing in your chest or abdomen. Imagine you are the vast open sky, and your thoughts, including the blame, are simply clouds passing by. You are the space, the awareness, not the passing phenomena. After a minute or 2, slowly return your attention to your present surroundings with a sense of calm and gentleness.
Like stepping back into the ocean from the waves.
Exactly. And the second one is more action-oriented. B, from blame to action, 1 to 3 minutes. Take a deep breath and maybe say an affirmation like, okay, things happen. I take appropriate responsibility for my part, but I refuse to self-destruct over it. This statement is a powerful way to separate your action or mistake from your core identity. Now, quickly list 3 things. 1, what is the most immediate need in this situation right now? 2, what is one specific area for improvement or learning for next time? 3, what is the core lesson I've learned here? Then pick one of these and commit to acting on it, even in a small way, immediately or very soon. This channels the energy of reflection into productive engagement, breaking the cycle of self-inflicted paralysis.
Those sound incredibly helpful. Okay, our deep dive has brought us to some really incredible intersections. The listener connected these core ideas we've been exploring: emptiness, mind, attachment to the Bible. Specifically mentioning your life is like a cloud, appearing for a little time and then vanishing. And even the story of Cain and Abel. They linked Abel to Su, emptiness void, and Cain to attachment or grasping. And they also brought up the phrase, Wan wuje beiyu, while all things are complete in me. It's just amazing how these themes echo across totally different traditions, showing a kind of universal wisdom, isn't it?
It truly is remarkable. This demonstrates the universality of these profound truths about the human condition and the nature of reality. We are genuinely seeing the same core wisdom expressed through vastly different cultural lenses, different symbols, different stories. Stepping back, what this highlights when we carefully interpret these diverse dialogues is how various spiritual paths seem to converge on the very nature of being and the journey towards liberation or wholeness.
So let's explore that Hebrew concept the listener mentioned, hevel. How does that connect?
Right, hevel. In Hebrew, hevel, which is of course Abel's name in the story of Cain and Abel, literally means breath, vapor, futility, or vanity. It signifies something transient, light, insubstantial. And significantly, in the book of Ecclesiastes in the Hebrew Bible, the famous recurring phrase hevel havelim, often translated as vanity of vanities, all is vanity, uses this exact same word, hevel. It's used there to emphasize the transient, impermanent, almost dreamlike nature of worldly pursuits when seen from a higher perspective. Now, this isn't necessarily a call to nihilism, saying nothing matters. Rather, it's often interpreted as a profound spiritual reminder to recognize impermanence, to see the vapor-like quality of things we often cling to, and thus to seek deeper meaning beyond the fleeting, surface-level aspects of existence.
And the Kabbalistic interpretation of Cain and Abel, how does that map onto emptiness and attachment?
Yes, the Kabbalistic interpretation of Cain and Abel, adds another rich symbolic layer, which resonates strongly with the themes we've discussed. Abel, hevel, representing breath or vapor, symbolizes the fleeting, transparent spiritual breath. It's seen as a subtle spiritual essence, something close to emptiness or nothingness, much like the Buddhist concept of chung. He represents the soul's inner, purer voice, sometimes associated with the neshama, the higher soul.
Okay, Abel as the subtle, empty, spiritual breath. What about Cain?
Cain, on the other hand, his name comes from the Hebrew root quana, which means to acquire, to possess, to create in a possessive sense. So Cain represents materiality, possessiveness, ego-driven impulses, that powerful drive we all have to grasp, to control, to accumulate in the material world, to make things mine.
And Cain kills Abel.
Cain kills Abel. This pivotal event is often interpreted metaphorically within Kabbalah as the ego's constant suppression of the soul's delicate spiritual breath. It's a story playing out within us all the time. We get caught up in our desires, Cain's wanting, our jealousies, Cain's envy, our endless comparisons, and our need for control and possession. And in doing so, we effectively drown out or kill that inner, pure, spiritual voice of Abel, that connection to hevel, to emptiness.
But the listener also said Abel is emptiness, suggesting Abel doesn't truly perish.
Exactly. Even though hevel is killed on the material plane, in this interpretation, he doesn't truly perish in a spiritual sense. His essence, being like breath or emptiness, returns to its source. It merges back into the vast emptiness, or in Kabbalistic terms, the Ein Sof, the infinite, the limitless, the ground of being. This beautifully echoes the Buddhist concept of not born, not extinguished, where the true essence, the true mind, is beyond creation and cessation. The soul's breath, though often suppressed by the ego, Cain, exists eternally in the cosmic embrace, in that primordial emptiness.
So the profound insight from interpreting this ancient story is how our grasping ego-driven self, Cain, constantly attempts to extinguish or ignore our connection to spiritual emptiness and freedom. able. Yet that true spiritual essence remains, reminding us that profound wisdom and liberation come from releasing that grasping attachment, Cain, and returning to our essential, unconditioned nature, able hevel.
Beautifully put. That's the core dynamic.
So if we apply this lens, those failures or setbacks that we experience, like the listener's babysitting incidents, they aren't truly crushing defeats, but maybe opportunities for growth, for expanding our capacity. It's not about avoiding hardship, but perhaps embracing it as part of the path.
Precisely. Kabbalah, like many wisdom traditions, views every event, especially challenges and apparent failures, as a potential tikkun. That means a chance for repair, for rectification, for learning, for course correction. From this perspective, there are no purely bad events in an ultimate sense. Every setback is a potential lesson for the soul, a moment designed to help us grow. The very imperfection of the world, as the listener noted, is, in this view, a necessary condition for our spiritual development.
Like needing resistance to build muscle.
Exactly like that. This is beautifully illustrated by the Kabbalistic concept of expanding the vessel. The Kli is our capacity to receive spiritual light or insight. If we live in a protective greenhouse, as the listener so aptly put it, sheltered from all hardship, perhaps through modern overparenting or excessive self-coddling, we don't strengthen or expand our spiritual capacity, our Kli, to hold more light. Challenges are absolutely essential for growth. They are the friction that polishes the soul, that expands the vessel.
This resonates with other traditions too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Taoist wisdom offers a very similar perspective with phrases like Ayengsho, Shun Kiziran, follow the natural flow, accept what comes, and Lomani, Shun Laitin, which basically means meet challenges as they come, adaptively responding with what's needed, like generals blocking soldiers or earth blocking water. These encapsulate the wisdom of accepting life's unpredictable flow and responding flexibly, rather than rigidly resisting or trying to control everything. And think of the biblical figure Jacob. Again, his name relates to grasping or supplanting. His famous wrestling match, a struggle, a challenge, transforms him into Israel, a name often interpreted as one who contends with God or prevails with God. He gains spiritual freedom and a new, higher identity despite suffering a physical injury, his hip. This symbolizes that letting go of attachment to the physical or the fixed identity, embracing the struggle, brings profound spiritual liberation. It often involves a kind of dying to one's old, limited self.
Like the seed dying to live.
Exactly. The seed dying to live is another powerful cross-cultural analogy here. Like a seed that must die and decay in the ground to sprout new life, or a grain of wheat that falls into the earth to yield a great harvest. We often must die to the material, grasping, egoic self, what Taoism might call the Shishen, the conscious, often diluted mind, tied to senses and attachments for spiritual awakening to occur. This allows our Yuanshen, our primordial spirit or true self, to emerge. The Cain within us, ego, attachment, delusion, the small self, constantly tries to suppress the able, primordial spirit, true self, connection to emptiness. True life and wisdom emerge only when we overcome the clinging, possessive ego and connect to our deeper Yuanshen.
Okay, so the key takeaway from interpreting all these different traditions seems to be that embracing life's challenges and uncertainties, rather than constantly seeking comfort and control, is actually the path to expanding our spiritual capacity and experiencing true freedom and flourishing.
That sums it up beautifully. It's counterintuitive to the ego, but central to wisdom.
Right. And this conversation has circled back repeatedly to the inner heart, hasn't it? Connecting our inner state to the world around us. Our listener brought in the concept of God's law, interpreting it not as just a rigid rule book, but more like a pH test strip or a mirror for our inner state. And finally, that profound phrase from the Confucian sage Mencius, Wan Wu Ji Beiyuk, all things are complete in me. These ideas really seem to bring everything we've discussed together, connecting the inner and the outer.
Yes, this really feels like the combination of our deep dive, bringing all the threads together. When we connect these final pieces, interpreting them in light of what we've discussed, it reveals so clearly how inner transformation is intrinsically linked to our perception of reality, and how these diverse traditions, using different languages, point towards the same fundamental wellspring of wisdom.
So God's law as a mirror or pH test strip, how does that interpretation work?
The listener's metaphor is truly insightful. Interpreting God's law, or the Dao, or universal principles, not as a burden or just a punitive list of external rules, but as a guide, is key. As the Apostle Paul suggested in the New Testament, The law was added so that the trespass might increase, meaning it functions like a mirror to illuminate our spiritual journey. It shows us our inner state, reveals our distance from the Tao or God's nature or our own true potential. It helps us know our sins or our deviations, not primarily for condemnation, but for awareness, for tikkun, repair, for growth.
So it's diagnostic, not just prescriptive.
Exactly. And this leads to a profound shift from external compliance to internal joy. If we merely follow laws or ethical principles externally, out of fear or obligation, it often feels restrictive, like a burden. But the ideal state, described in many traditions, is when our hearts genuinely align with the Tao or with love, when our inner state is one of peace, compassion, and unity. In that state, following the law principles like loving God and neighbor or living virtuously becomes spontaneous, natural, and joyful. It's like a fish swimming freely in water. It doesn't feel restricted by the water, it's its natural element. This inner alignment indicates the dissolution of ego, prejudice, and selfish desires.
And that connects to karma and compassion. Hurting others is hurting yourself.
Precisely. That principle, hurting others is hurting yourself, which is the foundation of love your neighbor as yourself, stems from this understanding of interconnectedness. What you project into the world, whether it's positive or negative energy, kind or cruel actions, compassionate or judgmental thoughts, will ultimately ripple back and affect you. Your internal state manifests in your interactions, and the world, in a sense, reflects that back. Your cruelty to others is, in its deepest sense, ultimately cruelty to yourself, because at some fundamental level, we are not truly separate.
Which leads to the idea of the world as a mirror of the heart.
Yes, the world is a mirror of the heart. The world we experience isn't just an objective, external, separate entity out there. It's to a significant extent a projection or reflection of our own inner state. If your heart holds darkness, fear, flaws, and judgment, you will tend to perceive the world as dark, threatening, flawed, and judgmental. Conversely, if your heart is cultivated towards peace, compassion, and acceptance, you perceive more beauty, opportunity, and connection. The profound insight here is that inner change fundamentally shifts our perceived outer reality.
And the listener made that powerful point. God didn't make the world perfect because in its imperfection, humanity would seek perfection. What's the wisdom you see in interpreting the world's imperfection that way? It sounds like the imperfection itself might be a necessary gift.
I think it's a deeply insightful way to frame it. In many traditions, this world is explicitly seen not as a finished, perfect product, but as a place of tikkun, repair, or spiritual cultivation, or a school for the soul. It's precisely through navigating imperfection, through experiencing pain, loss, setbacks, ethical dilemmas, and challenges that we are spurred to grow, to learn, to question, and ultimately to expand our spiritual vessel, our claim. The seeking for perfection that arises from experiencing imperfection in this context is not about achieving flawless external outcomes or creating a utopia. Rather, it's the driving force that leads us back to our own inner heart, back to introspection, where true perfection understood as wholeness or alignment with the Tao or realizing our true nature resides. So in a profound sense, repairing our own heart, cultivating inner virtue and wisdom is the way we participate in repairing or healing the world. The insight, the world's imperfection is the very forge of human and spiritual growth.
Okay, finally, let's turn to that incredible phrase from Mencius. All things are complete in me. For many people, hearing all things are complete in me might initially conjure images of material wealth or maybe even an egoistic self-sufficiency. But our listener clearly has a much deeper interpretation, pointing towards an internal, spiritual completeness. How should we understand this?
Yes, this is a pivotal concept, and it's very frequently misunderstood through a superficial, material, or egoic lens. It certainly doesn't mean having all possible material possessions, which, ironically, as the listener hinted, often leads to the opposite feeling, a perpetual sense of lack. Always comparing, always feeling insufficient, no matter how much one actually has externally. That poorness of heart, that feeling of inner lack, actually creates the perceived lack in the world.
So what does it mean spiritually?
Let's explore this from the different traditions we've touched on. From a Buddhist perspective, the I, or me, as this phrase, doesn't refer to the small, limited egoic self. It refers to the universal Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, or the true self that is inherent within all beings. This inherent nature, this true mind, already contains all virtues, infinite wisdom, compassion, potential. Awakening to it reveals this inherent completeness. Nothing needs to be added from the outside.
It's already there.
It's already there. From a Daoist perspective, to be truly aligned with the Tao, The fundamental way or principle of the universe is to be intrinsically one with all creation. Therefore, all things are in me isn't about personal possession of objects, but of realizing a profound unity, a state of oneness where the boundary between self and cosmos dissolves. You contain the pattern of the whole.
And Kabbalah.
From a Kabbalistic perspective, the human soul is understood to be created in God's image, Tselem Elohim. This means that, at its core, the soul holds the blueprint, the potential for all possibilities of life, mirroring the divine structure. There's a saying, "My soul mirrors all things. The entire universe's structure is inherent within me." So the true completeness, referred to in So Daye, is fundamentally an internal realization. It's the recognition that wisdom, compassion, divine potential, creativity, and an endless wellspring of being are already present within. When the heart aligns with the Tao, or realizes its true nature, we are freed from the illusion of lack and experience a profound, inherent abundance that is independent of external circumstances. The insight, true wealth, is not external acquisition, but the internal realization of our innate fullness and potential.
And our listener emphasizes, crucially, that rational understanding of all this isn't enough. It's about wisdom, a transformation of the heart, not just the brain. This feels like a really critical distinction, especially today, in our information-rich but perhaps wisdom-poor world.
Absolutely. You've hit on a fundamental truth that runs through all these traditions. Knowledge is often intellectual, an external accumulation of facts, concepts, theories, primarily engaging the analytical brain. It can be very useful, but it often remains separate from our core being. Wisdom, however, is something deeper. It's an internal, experiential transformation of the heart of a sukhsut, the cultivation or refinement of the heart-mind, its embodied understanding. This is precisely why Buddha pushed Ananda relentlessly to find his mind through direct experience, through self-inquiry, rather than simply being given a neat logical answer. It's about breaking the mirror of the mind's illusions, as Zen might say, through direct seeing, to return to its origin, to the true unconditioned self. The path of saints, sages, and mystics across all these traditions we've touched upon is fundamentally the cultivation of the heart. As the book of Proverbs in the Bible says, guard your heart above all else, for from it flow the springs of life. It's not primarily about what you know intellectually, but about the quality of your being, the state of your heart, the ultimate insight.
Intellectual understanding is just the map. Wisdom is the actual journey, and the transformed destination arrived at through cultivating the heart.
Wow, what an incredible journey, really, into these dialogues of sages and scriptures. We've truly tried to unpack the elusive nature of the mind, peel back the layers of perceived reality, and found such profound connections between this ancient wisdom and our very modern, everyday struggles with things like self-doubt and blame. We've seen that interpreting sorrows isn't about emptiness as just nothingness, but understanding the emptiness of a fixed, independent self-nature. It's an invitation to release our tight grip on fleeting thoughts and perceived realities, and those practical steps for navigating self-blame. Incredibly helpful.
Indeed. And stepping back, looking at the bigger picture that emerged from interpreting these texts, we see that the emptiness of emptiness, letting go even of emptiness, isn't nihilism. It's a profound invitation to shed all illusions, even the subtle ones about spiritual attainment itself. And Siwi isn't about wanting or getting material things, but about returning to, realizing our inherent spiritual completeness, that boundless potential already within. The path to freedom, as these diverse traditions consistently reveal through careful interpretation, isn't achieved through intellectual understanding alone, however helpful that is. It requires the continuous, courageous cultivation of the heart, transforming that knowledge into lived wisdom and deep personal insight.
So, what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you go about your day? Well, maybe next time those you messed up voices arise, or you find yourself desperately clinging to a specific outcome, you could consider. Is this feeling, this thought, this situation a fixed, solid reality? Or is it more like a passing cloud? Can you perhaps find or sense the vast sky of awareness within you, the space that holds those clouds? And how might letting go, even just a little, of what you think you must have or must be, actually open you up to the boundless reality of all things complete in me? That, according to these sages, already exists right within your own heart. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating, ongoing dialogue of your own existence.